watching an underwater UFO as large as a football field moving at hundreds of miles per hour underwater.
Have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Aliens exist and President Trump knows about it.
The United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology.
We are not all to be traced back to one blob of germplasm.
And the implant is finally removed.
There's no evidence how the object got inside the body.
Can you comment on the drones?
Our military knows where they took off from. Something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
Hello, people. Good to see you. Welcome to the stream. So, finally, we're here, man. We made it. And today, we're gonna take a look at another interview of our boy Chris Ramsey. And it is about Grant Cameron. I gotta be honest, I haven't seen that much of this guy. He's actually been pretty much a legend, you can say, in the UFO space. Canadian guy, Canadian researcher, you know, author of like a lot of books, you know, doing podcasts, stuff like that. And he started in 1975, actually, which is pretty early. And yeah, lots of things to say, I feel like, from what I read. So I would say a lot of interesting claims. He got some new theories, you know, in terms of who are those aliens really, and maybe he has an approach that I did not hear of for now. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. I think I might split this whole video maybe into two parts, because this guy is talking for quite some time. And I think about an hour is all right. So I'd say we're going to hop into the video. And yeah, man, if you're new to the stream, before we start though, I would appreciate it a lot if you're hitting the subscribe button, man. This would support me a lot. And yeah, man, leave in the comments how you feel about this whole topic. If you have ideas, if you want something that I cover. So if you have any ideas, man, leave them in the comment section. Say hello and welcome. I'm glad you're on, man. So let's start. We go.
So that he said at that point he could heal people. This woman comes up to her and there's twins. These women are twins. They're in their 70s. One woman says, my sister here, she had a stroke. She can't hear. She's totally deaf. Can you heal her? And Chris is standing in front of the hotel. Suddenly a cell phone. There's Tim Taylor. Tim Taylor says, if you're in front of a hotel and someone needs a healing, go ahead and do it.
No way.
Yeah. So he says, I don't know.
Wait a second. Hold on a second.
It gets weirder.
This is so strange.
He puts his hands on her ears and he says, in the name of Jesus, like I already said, in the name of Jesus, I heal you, or whatever. And this woman goes into my lecture and she comes out of the lecture and she says, I can hear everything said. I can hear. All the people from the conference go to this restaurant across the street. This girl comes back and she's distraught. She's like, holy, you can't believe what happened. It was like a third person was in the conversation. She says, it was like, Tim Taylor, Tim Taylor, Tim Taylor. The phone was a transmitter phone that he had been given this phone. I don't know if this is true. He'd been given this phone. It was a transmitter phone. Everything that he did was being recorded by somebody. That summer, a rich business guy out of New Jersey has a cottage, or may have built a big log cabin in Pennsylvania. So I get invited, and I'm the only guy with no money there. And suddenly, Tim Taylor shows up, and it was my friend that invited him. And then he says to Tim Taylor, he says, hey, we're going on a UFO dig. You want to come along? And Tim goes, yeah, sure. So they go to the Gerald Anderson's case.
Okay.
And they're pulling up this metal, and I still remember my friend. Now he won't talk.
Dude, one question. Oh, not question. Something I have to add. Dude, the Chris Ramsey production is always on point, man. There's cinematography, crazy. I like it. Nice editing, always feels very good. And I can see the guy has quite a pace, you know, in terms of talking. But yeah.
He's forgotten everything. He's forgotten everything that happened. Tim Taylor said, when he got some of this mail, he said, this is the real deal. I had the download experience. So we talked about downloads. And he talked about the invention. So he gets this invention. He's got 40 patents. And then he's in contact with, he calls them the beings or whoever. He doesn't call them aliens, whatever. And they give him these inventions. So the first one came. He'd woken up in the morning with this idea in his head. And supposedly this company sold for 88 million or 100 million on NASDAQ or whatever. And he said, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. So at one point, he pulls out his cell phone and he says, what do you think of this? Shows me this photo of these two guys on a painting. And these two guys are flying through space on this painting. And they look like they got pajamas on. One guy's older than the other guy. And then he shows me another photograph of these balls all going down this tunnel. And then he shows me another one, this eclipse thing, where the eclipse is taking place. And then he shows me this photograph, it's like a screen on the outside of a building. And then he shows me the catchers. He shows me this. This is 999 Sepulveda Avenue. And then he says, you know what this is? He said, this is where the jump room was. If I had known who he was,
oh my goodness,
I would have paid attention.
It's going to be a deep one, I think. A lot of information, bro.
Hey, Chris. I'm a U.S. Navy Medical Corps officer. I've been in for a while now, and I watched your video on the anatomy of an alien, the EBOs, and I thought it was really interesting because the person speaks like a scientist. So as in any dialect, that person has a similar dialect to somebody who does biological research. While in initial training to become a Navy officer, I had the privilege to serve with a few people going to that same location. They were microbiologists. And if you know any of the connections, they were also Mormons. So I thought that was interesting. During the time, I got sort of to know that person as an acquaintance and made a joke about alien bodies. And that if it were true to send me this nonchalant text that we've never texted each other before that I would reply to with wrong number. In that regard, they texted me about 2 to 3 months after we had finished training with just that. And could they have been messing with me? Yes. But I don't know. One way or the other, it's a data point. Thanks.
Welcome, Grant Cameron.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you, sir. As you know, I'm just sort of you've been this trailblazer, especially for Canadian UFO researchers, but honestly, just UFO researchers worldwide. Your career spans decades, and looking into UFO insiders, government insiders, presidential papers, exploring the phenomenon from the nuts and bolts aspect all the way to the non-physical and sort of consciousness-based aspect of the phenomenon, which is something I'm looking forward to touching on, as I'm sure that's kind of like the peak of your research, which is really interesting. So yeah, thank you for making it all the way out here. I appreciate you.
Well, it's an honor to be here and to be in the skiff. And it's just hopefully you have a high enough security clearance to take what I can give you.
Not nearly high enough.
And there's not many Canadians. So I appreciate the work you've done. I mean, you've done a tremendous amount in a very short time. So
yeah,
because usually we see it as American phenomena, and there's not many Canadians. So I congratulate you on what you've done here. I'm very impressed.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you, Grant. It really does. And you know what? To get it started, we were at lunch and you presented me with this here stone, this piece of what looks to be maybe some slate of a Canadian mountain range, I would assume.
Well, it's I don't know, not mountains. It's flat, but it's a lake area, like the lake area near Kenora, Ontario.
And why is this particular rock so special?
So this is one of the more famous. I guess there's two big famous stories: the Shag Harbor in Canada, and the second one is this one, is the Falcon Lake.
Oh damn!
This is 1967, 10 days before the 6-Day War begins. And there's a geologist out looking for metals and stuff like that. And he tells a story where he's sitting there having lunch, sitting on a rock, and all of a sudden he hears the geese all go sort of crazy, and he looks, and there's these two UFOs hovering over this sort of a small little lake. And he watches, and the one disappears, and the one comes and lands. And it would be about maybe 75 feet from where he was sitting on this rock. And so he looks at this and he thinks it's American space, test craft or whatever. The door opens on this thing. And I always go when I talk to people about UFO sightings, when they have UFO sightings, and this falls in the same category, although it's very bizarre, is when you ask people, what was the UFO doing? It wasn't doing anything. And this wasn't doing anything either. It just landed and the door opened up. And this guy was a Polish guy. His name was, I'm going to forget his name. Michalak. Yeah, Stephen Michalak. So he walks up to this thing and the door is open. You can see this light coming out of it. And he says, okay, Yankee boys, come on out. You in trouble? You need some help or whatever? And there's no answer. And then he goes in Polish, he goes in Russian, he knows all sorts of languages, and nothing really answers. And he sort of looks in and you can see these lights and the walls are sort of very thick and whatever. And at that moment, the door sort of closes and he's got a rubber glove on because he's prospecting. He's got his rubber glove on and the craft lifts off the ground and starts to rotate, and as it rotates around, there's a grid, which makes no sense whatsoever. A grid on the side of a flying saucer, and this hot air comes out, and it starts his shirt on fire. His glove is on fire, and he ends up with this burn patch like a checkerboard on his from this grid pattern. And the thing flies off, and he's throwing up. He's really trying to get back to Winnipeg, and he managed to get back to Winnipeg. And it becomes one of the more famous stories. Blue Book comes up to investigate it. It's investigated ruthlessly he was down at Mayo Clinic, and this burn would come back on his chest.
Gotta say, though, was quite a small mark, right? So the pattern of the grid was not as big as I thought it would be. If it would come out of this UFO, it would be like super close. You know what I mean? Because it was like down there. It was like, oh, sorry. But it was like, I don't know, like this big, maybe like my head, something like that. So not as big. Interesting.
Sort of weird stuff that happens in ufology and in paranormal, where it goes away, then it comes back.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it came back.
Yeah, it would come back all the time. Every couple of years, this would come back. So he was down to Mayo Clinic, and people recovered his records and stuff like that. And it was a very, very famous case in Canada. It was, some people call it the Canadian Roswell. So there's been nobody at the site because it's a very remote site. It's off Highway 1 just before you get to Falcon Lake. But you need to go in by horseback.
Even today.
Even today, yeah. Well, I guess you could walk down the path. It's in a forest area, a real thick forest area off the highway.
Yeah, that's a testament to how far we've come.
Yeah.
There are places in the world that we still can't get to without a horse, which is wild.
There's a guy by the name of Rob Freeman. If you know him, he has the big camera array.
Right.
He has all these cameras and stuff, and I think he was down at the Monroe Institute doing some stuff there, and he does the blindfold reading, which I think is really, really important. He does the stuff with people seeing through blindfolds and stuff like that. That's his latest research. But anyway, he was doing a film project. He was in Manitoba. He wanted to do the Charlie Red Star, which was my case. And then he said, well, we want to go to Falcon Lake. So I said, yeah, I'll go to Falcon Lake. So we went there, and there's a tour guide who has a farm there, or horses just off the highway. And he then takes tours in there. And when we got to the site, there was, he identified the fact that there had been less than 100 people since 1967 who had actually been to this site. And so the film crew is filming, and Rob Freeman's filming, and this tour guide is explaining this whole thing. And I'm sitting there, and I'm, sort of bored, and I'm walking around. And suddenly I see that the rock is all fracturing, the top of the rock. And I'm thinking, well, this is a case where the UFO landed, and there was no tripods. So it was actually sitting right on the rock. And so these pieces so I start picking up these pieces of rock, and then I fill up my pockets. And I figure, I could sell these for like $50 a piece at a conference, And then I look at my assistant, she's picking up rocks, she's putting them in her pocket. This filming is going on. And so from time to time I give it out. So this I brought for you. And the key thing is the UFO was actually touching the rock that you have there. It was sitting right on the rock. And they had, I think, slight radiation, not really radiation, and some stuff. But the weird thing they had, which you see a lot, I wrote a book on it, on Ports and Manifestations. So what they had is this metal, this silver metal that appeared in the cracks.
Like angel hair type?
No, like actual metal.
Okay.
Yeah, actual pieces of metal that was in the cracks.
Sure.
but they didn't discover it, I think, till 68. They went in for another investigation at 68. That's when they found the metal. But you'll find that all the time. And I always refer to that as sort of the weird part of the UFO thing. I say, do you think a UFO crossed 1,000 light years, came to Earth, and then pieces started falling off the UFO? Come on, give your head a shake. I even talked to Hal Puthoff. I said, Hal, you know this is at ports. This is not pieces of flying saucer. This is not things breaking off the flying saucer. They're dropping this stuff on purpose to inspire you to do something and to make you wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
The whole theory of wow thing, make you
that's right.
awe and curious. And so you'll research. And I said, you even know because you had the experience with Uri Geller. And that was a story that Uri Geller in 72, they were doing research with him. And so Edgar Mitchell, Hal Puthoff, and Uri Geller.
One thing I gotta say, man, Uri Geller is super interesting for me because I grew up being a very, very, very young kid with him and just know this guy from being the spoon bender, man. And there has actually been, oh no, something in my eye. And I just know that Uri Geller has been actually accused of quite some fraud in German TV and stuff like this. So it's kind of sus guy, in my opinion. But I haven't done that much research considering Uri Geller. But it's interesting that he's bringing this guy up, gotta say.
Go for lunch. And Uri Geller is eating ice cream. And suddenly he says, oh, what? And he pulls this thing out of his mouth and his lip is cut. And they look at him and then Edgar Mitchell says, that's my flight pin. What's my flight pin doing in your mouth? And he said he'd lost a flight pin in Houston 2 years before. And so he pulls this thing out and they're looking at this flight pin is in Yuri's mouth. And so they go back to the SRI and then Yuri's in another room. So I can't blame Yuri for this. Yuri's in one room and Edgar Mitchell and Hal Puthoff are sitting in the other room. And all of a sudden they hear this tink. And to look around, and the back half of the flight pin is on the floor.
Oh wow!
And so that's why I said to Hal, this is this weird stuff that they do,
time slip stuff.
So I wrote a whole book on this whole thing about approach manifestations. You'll ask experiences. They'll say, "Oh, I just had this one UFO sighting." I say, "Hey, anything ever fly around your house or fall out of the ceiling?"
Yeah,
can you hang on and go and bring back all this stuff? And that's fallen in coins and
we hear about liquid, coming from these orbs. Even Chris Bledsoe, there are pictures that he's shared of molten metal on the ground, and you hear a lot of stories about things like that. But then initially you wonder why, like what's happening here? Is it shedding its skin? Is that just some?
And the sad part is that with all those people like Chris Bledsoe also, there's so many weird things happening at the same time, because it's always, to me, kind of weird that they're always these people that seems to be the one where all this crazy stuff is only happening to them, like every couple of weeks they're coming up with some banger leak, some banger insider info. And it's like, dude, I mean, yeah, maybe you were choosing for this path in life, right? But sometimes it's a little sus to me, because a lot of times when they get like, let's say, pressed and forced to, release some more info, some raw material, raw footage actually, because they claim to have a lot of things. A lot of times they don't bring it up and they even block other people. This is what I observed. So it's kind of, as I said, a lot of disinformation. Not saying that everything everywhere is disinformation, but man, we got to be careful in this UFO space.
Property of how it instantiates. But then the theory, and I love, this is something I wanted to bring up as well, was your theory of wow is really interesting, because it kind of neatly, in a way, ties together most of what we're experiencing here, which is this idea that it is here to inspire you. It's instantiating in any, it's kind of interacting with your consciousness to determine how to instantiate. And then when it does show up, it's meant to have you question things or to inspire you, to create like almost like a muse would. And I think that's really interesting when you look at the phenomenon from that lens, because then it becomes more about what is this trying to teach me rather than why are they here?
Yeah.
And I think that's just more profound and aligns a lot more with the experiencer experience, for lack of a better word, but in the fact that they feel like it happened for a reason, like there was a message there, like there was some type of direction or guidance that was being attributed to them by these
and it's never a full message, because a full message is left brain. It's we're here to bring you freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's. What they're doing is
freedom of democracy, Jesus and McDonald's. That's
they're doing the right.
You keep it up, bro. Thank you for your support, brother. Appreciate it, man. Welcome.
Thing. It's a symbol. You're never going to figure it out. They don't give you the full answer. They just give you a breadcrumb. So they do weird things like the one with Gary Nolan. I remember when I first saw it when Gary Nolan and Hal started doing all the analysis on the metal, and they had the Ubatuba piece.
Right.
And they had two fragments of the Ubatuba piece, and the one piece was completely normal, and the other one had all these isotopes were all messed up. And it's the same metal. It's the same, comes from the same craft. And I can just say, let's see whatever intelligence is just laughing and say, man, look at this. Look at the expression on his face. And you see these weird, and they're so weird. That's the thing. It's like a crop circle, or they want it to be really, really weird. Sometimes I call it the Jesus circus, where if Jesus hadn't walked on water, fed 5,000 people, raised Lazarus from the dead, you never heard of the guy.
Right.
And that's what they're doing. They're doing this weird thing where.
So you talk about it.
Yeah. So you talk about it, and you would have cases like we had one of the most bizarre ones I had was a woman experiencer in the Tucson area, and she came into her bathroom, and there was a pile of dirt in the middle of the bathroom floor, and it had these little white discs in it. And it's like she's looking at this thing, she photographs it, and she brings in the researcher, and he looks at it, and then they go to the restaurant, and then they're sitting at the restaurant, and somebody leaves the thing, come back, and they say, look under your chair. She's got another pile of dirt under her chair. And it's these kind of weird things where it makes or they put the dime. A lot of those dimes. I remember I was actually talking to that researcher, and he said, can I show you something? And he reaches over and he gets this thing full of dimes. I said, I know the dime story. Everybody talks about dimes. Their dead mother is bringing them.
Dude, this. Oh, what the hell? I was clicking on something. Almost ended the stream. By accident, but I just wanted to say this arm ring, how do you call it in English, is kind of pinching into his arm. Dude, looks hella uncomfortable. But yeah, man, kind of hard to follow this guy at points, gotta say, because he's super fast. He's just like spitting. Damn. Relax, bro.
Dimes, and people would find, I used to volunteer at Ronald McDonald House, and the one of the people that was a cleaner there, she said, my mother has all the time in here, I find dimes on the windowsills and stuff like that, and she believed it was her mother. But it's this weird sort of thing where they want it mysterious.
It's guiding you in almost like a synchronistic fashion, where if you're open to it, you'll kind of start seeing a pattern, and otherwise you won't even see it at all, which again, kind of favors the experiencer over the skeptic in terms of witnessing the phenomenon.
Yeah. So there's the way I sort of see it is there's two different levels. I always say that science doesn't work. They think they work on proof, but I say they work on belief. So what you have is you have a hypothesis, which is a guess.
Right.
Nothing more than a guess. I guess it's this. It looks like this. You do some experiments, you do some observations, you do a conclusion, then what do? You make another guess.
Yeah.
You make another guess, and you can make another, and you each time you get closer and closer and closer. The difference with the experiencer and stuff is if you had the experience, like you were talking about out-of-body experiences and stuff, people who have these non-local experiences, they won't say, well, I think it was this. They'd say, I know.
Right. There's a knowing.
There's a knowing. It's called a knowing. Even in the field, it's called a knowing.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me in 2013 when I had this download experience watching Colin Andrew give a lecture on crop circles, which I wasn't interested. So the contact modality was I was daydreaming.
Before we continue with today's conversation, I'd like to point something out. You see, I'm sitting here talking to a researcher. Someone who spends years digging through archives, documents, records, chasing information most people never see. That kind of work requires curiosity. But here's the irony. While researchers are digging into hidden systems, there are companies quietly digging into us. Data brokers collect your name, address, phone number, email history, even relatives. And if you're researching sketchy subjects or speaking publicly like our guest today, having your personal information scattered across the internet is not ideal.
I'm gonna leave it.
I'm
just gonna leave it because of I appreciate the effort, man. Of course, Ramsey, so let's watch it.
That's why I use Incogni. You see, Incogni automatically contacts data brokers on your behalf and requests that your personal information be removed. Instead of you trying to track down dozens of companies yourself, Incogni handles the requests and keeps following up. And if you want to take control of your data, go to incogni.com/area52 and use code area52 to save 60% on an annual plan, because your privacy should not be declassified. Now let's get back to the research.
Thank you, bro.
I was just, my mind was wandering, and all of a sudden, boom, all this stuff came in.
Gotta say, bro, there was one very, very smooth transition, man. I like that.
My head, and I knew it. I walked around for 2 days. My head was just sort of spinning, and I went, "Wow!" You know, this is how. And I couldn't. I said it. You know, in 2012, I couldn't spell consciousness, but I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know, but it was just like this knowing is. And then I was trying to figure out what's this mean. And then it got more. The consciousness element got more elaborate, more elaborate, more elaborate. And suddenly I was going down that road, and I remember one major interviewer at the time said, "I can't believe you've done this, Grant. I can't believe he was the president guy."
Yeah, he was kind of looking into
files.
Nuts and bolts.
I can't believe you've done this. And I said, "Well, Jerry, you know, I didn't really choose to do it. I sort of got teleported there.
Yeah.
It was not something that I entered." And you hear this.
Not something Jerry wanted to hear.
You hear with experiences all the time. None of them really planned it.
No.
It just suddenly they were in the middle of this thing.
That's right.
And it comes with this knowing, and they spend the rest of their life down the rabbit hole. I used to have meetings called rabbit hole meetings where people could come on the meeting. And I used to run a group called Experiences Anonymous in Winnipeg. So you could come to the meeting and you could sit there for 2 years and never tell your story, like alcohol times. And then when somebody told your story, you'd say, "Yeah, I thought it was crazy, but I'm going to tell my story
now. I want to tell mine."
And that's what this sort of thing is that people, they're afraid to talk about it because it's just so weird. They think everybody's going to think they're crazy.
Yep.
And they need someone that gives them, like in the big UFO meetings, you'll see before they have an experiencer meeting, an hour before the lectures begin. And all these people are in there and they're crying and they're talking because that's the first time they've ever been able to tell their experiences. So when I had these rabbit hole meetings, I had 100 people on a rabbit hole meeting where they could come on Zoom, they could turn off their camera, they could put their camera on, they could talk whenever they wanted. Nobody knew who they were, and they could sit there and listen to other people having these experiences. And that's the thing that they really missed, that they would go to a conference, not
community
to the lectures. They were going to this experiencer thing where their friends were, and they could tell their stories and stuff. So that's where you see a different aspect of the UFO phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody thinks you're talking about, you know, you're at a UFO conference and you're talking about flying saucers and showing photographs. And no, you're talking about this, what's reality? What's really going on? And is there a God? Almost all these conversations gravitate to
super deep. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting as well. Like something I've noticed with a lot of experiencers is that initially you'll hear the sort of bullet point version of the experience. And you've probably had this many times as well, but you know that as soon as you scratch the surface, you get into some weird stuff. And normally people are very reticent and reluctant to come forward with this information and say, you know, they'll start with, "I saw a big black triangle, you know, it was hovering at 1,000 feet, it took off." And then you go, "Oh, interesting. Anything else happened maybe the day before or the day after?" And they go,
"Oh yeah, that's how it all starts, man."
"Oh yeah, I had an orb float through the wall and my cupboards were all open and there was a poltergeist in my house." Or, you know, I swear I saw, you know, my dead relative walk through that. Like you'll have these adjacent, super bizarre fringe and niche stories pop up, and rightfully so. Like, you know, people are but little by little intaking the UFO stuff. And much like we're seeing with public sort of the disclosure movement, is that we're being sort of drip fed this nuts and bolts militarized physical version of it, which I gotta say they've been doing since the 50s. Like they haven't really changed their strategy on how they're giving us any of that. You would think that after 70, 80 years,
oh boy,
we would start.
Roswell. We gotta watch the new Spielberg movie that's coming up in June, man. Cannot wait for this one. Maybe Roswell was all a psyop, bro. Maybe it is. We all got fooled. The real aliens are us. We are the ones. Who knows, man? Who knows? We'll see.
Start to also sort of drip feed the fact that, hey, there is a non-physical component to this that is probably much greater, much more impactful, and much more present than the physical part. But for whatever reason, you know, it takes real research and sort of the research that you've been doing to come to that conclusion. And whatever that is gets more and more and more confusing. It doesn't get more clear. It gets so weird.
I mentioned that before we had come in here about James Stokowski, where he ran the OSAP program, the big government program. And he made the statement that Reed was going to move it from $22 million when they finished that. They were going to move to 100 to 150 million.
Harry Reid, yeah.
And he said $150 million. And we weren't going to go chasing around the country looking after flittering UFOs. And he was basically saying it's the paranormal stuff. And the experiencers have the same thing. They think it's not related. So when you say to someone, oh, I had this dream, I just dreamed of aliens. I don't think I really had an abduction or whatever. And then you say, anything happened in your childhood? Oh yeah, and they don't think it's related,
right?
And you and I now, and I think the UFO field is starting to know it's related, because I started in '75, and in '75 they would have locked you up if, as I said, they would have locked you up if you said you had more than one UFO sighting, because it was like you have random UFO sightings, they're from extraterrestrials, and you don't have repeated UFO sightings. There's no paranormal. There was none of that sort of stuff. It was a very simple world, and it's sort of evolved. Whether it's the intelligence doing it or whether it's the government dripping it, because I think the government is dripping the story as well.
Yeah.
Gradually trying to acclimatize people, because you had this RAND study in the 60s that said unless you acclimatize the people, it's game over. You're going to have a lot of trouble.
They've probably done that over and over and over, that study, to determine where we're at.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that they take that approach. And, because you look at when Stargate got declassified and sort of, I think it was like 2017 when all the papers came out, but like in 95 or 96, there was this admission, that this thing was real, and immediately they go into, it never worked, like it's all blah, blah, hokey stuff. But like, meanwhile, we know that they're still obviously practicing this stuff, and it moved over to, SAIC, and it got privatized. And it's just interesting that they still take that approach, and that signals to me, and I don't know what that says to you, but to me, it definitely signals that either the truth empowers the public much more than they're aware, much more than the government's comfortable with, or B, they don't know what they're dealing with. Like, those are the two options, right?
Yeah. I think they don't really know. They know, like Jim Semivan always talks about this. Yes, we have bodies and crafts. Yes, there are legacy programs. I know where they are. I'm not going to identify where they are. But he said, I will make a bet. I will bet 1 year of my pension salary against anybody who has something different that they haven't got a clue. Because you got bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know what you're dealing with. And I think that's the whole thing, which is the risk of now Trump coming forward is he's answering like 1,000,001 questions on Epstein files. Once this comes forward, it's going to be 1,000,001 questions on UFOs, and he's going to say, "Can we talk about something else here? What's all?" And that's the thing; it opens up the door. They don't want to open up the door, so they do this gradual. I wrote about it first in 80.
Maybe Trump the time traveler is sorting things out for us, though, and he will release all the UFO files. Man, I'm very kind of skeptical how this drop of UFO files will be and what it actually will include, and if everything's redacted as always, and if it's gonna be a banger or if it's just gonna be a nothing burger, is usually considering what we got so far in terms of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. So kind of very curious how it's gonna be.
When I talked about the Bob Lazar thing, that's what I believed it was. It was this deal where they wanted the story out, but they wanted it to fall apart.
To control it,
yeah. And then, so you if you want the story out, you give it to the New York Times and Washington Post. You take them to the facilities. You show them the bodies. You show them the crafts. You show them the photographs. But if you don't want it, if you sort of want it out, you give it to Bob Lazar. You give it to somebody who
passage material.
Yeah, you know that it's going to fall apart as soon as that guy becomes public. They're going to realize the guy had a pirate flag and he had a car and he worked with prostitutes and all this sort of stuff. And the thing falls apart, and that's what they want. So they put it out and they pull it back. And I really can't talk about it, but they're actually doing it again. They've done it. They did it with Tom DeLonge. That's what Tom DeLonge was about. And this new guy, he's a film guy. And
you mean, are you referring to the Stars Academy?
Yeah. Well, then this is the new guy. And I said, you knew the new Tom DeLonge, and he's a film guy. And I sort of ruined it for him the first time, so I can't say too much. But basically, I was involved in this as well. And I'm warning him. I'm going, like, they've done this 100 times, and watch out.
You mean there's a new guy being approached by the government?
Yeah.
Right.
And I was part of it. Yeah. I was part.
And we know who this is?
I know who it is. Yeah,
would I know who this is if you said it? Okay.
No. So anyway, and I just gave my opinion. I said, it's up to you. It's your money. You're spending your money. You can do what you want. And it's sort of like, I'm in the game here. And I said,
they're letting him in.
You're the new Tom DeLonge. And they always use the same statement. Like Tom DeLonge went in the skiff and he said, "You guys can't get this out. I can get this out." And they said, "Maybe this will work." And so they put him out. And then before that, it was Bill Moore. Before that was Bob Emenegger. Before that, it was Walt Disney. And it's this whole thing is the idea is.
Do you think Spielberg's part of that train too?
Yeah. Well, the Hollowman Air Force Base is the prime story.
Yeah.
That's the story that.
Well, let's go to the Hollowman Air Force Base and the Bob Emenegger story, because this is, for me, part of core UFO lore. Not only does it imply the CIA trying to control a narrative, but it also implies that we have some type of meeting or treaty potentially with some type of intelligence.
And that's a highly classified subject. And if you listen to the last interview that James Lukatsky did, they asked him about communication. And he said, "I can't go there." Eric Walker, we asked him 30 years ago, "What about communication?"
Cannot tell you anything about it, I'm sorry, sir. This information is very much declassified, so... I know, sorry, it's very classified, so I cannot tell you anything about it. I'm very sorry. Dude. It's always the same, dude. And then we get this, like, disinformation about a lot of stuff, you know? So, yeah. Gotta wait for some kind of disclosure, man.
And he said, "We promised not to tell."
Whoa.
So it seems to indicate, and if you go back in 59, they were channeling an alien at the CIA. There's stories that they were flashing lights with the planes. In the 50s.
Dan Sherman was in contact with these things as well. You look at even David Grush being asked by Ross Coulthart about treaties, and he kind of goes, he's kind of evasive on that answer as well.
That seems to be a very highly classified aspect. Are we actually dealing with these beings? And it would make sense. If you were the government, why would you not try to contact this intelligence if you know it's real? And they've known it's real since at least 1950. The Canadians were told, 1950, top secret memo. We were told by American officials, not people on the street. He said, by American officials, flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. It's of tremendous significance to the Americans. And there's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush who are trying to figure out the modus operandi. And we were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena.
And that is the Wilbur Smith document.
So they've known a lot of the pieces since then. And as I mentioned to you before, that was in the memo was written in November, and in December it was put out. December, just before Christmas. And 6 months later, Oman Slant, who is mentioned in the top secret memo, it said, we're putting this in front of Oman Slant. He was the head of weapons for the Canadian military, for the Defense Research Board. He was the chairman. And 6 months later, they have the first MK Ultra study or meeting happened right here in Montreal at McGill University, and Oman Salant was on that meeting with the CIA and with the Europeans with Britain, and then years later the CIA actually paid $1 million damage to the Canadians who were involved, including the wife of an MP. Yeah. So
you go directly from having UFOs are real, they exist in the Wilbur Smith memo. Immediately following that up by saying, and other phenomena such as like mental phenomenon is also involved here. And then 6 months later in Canada as well, they're like, well, they're saying mental stuff is involved. They start doing MK Ultra stuff at McGill. You got, doctors like Dr. Penfield doing all sorts of like sketchy, sort of operations on the brain and figuring out what's going on there. Even out west, didn't they have some stuff?
Saskatchewan,
in Saskatchewan as well, like some deprivation tanks that they were bringing unwilling. So they weren't telling people what they were doing and locking them in a deprivation tank to study what was going on.
So I always used to wonder, like, how did the Americans know that mental phenomena? Because Adamski doesn't appear until about 2 weeks after the detonation of the first hydrogen bomb. That's when he appears.
Right.
Just after they detonate the hydrogen bomb. That's 52.
52.
November of 52.
So
this is 2 years before. So Adamski was the first one to talk to them and said they were telepathic, but nobody was talking to aliens in 1950s. How did they know? And then you go and you get the other story about...
Man, I gotta be honest, dude. I haven't done too much research that deep into this whole UFO thing because it's quite time consuming, man. So yeah, man, I try to cover things with what I'm doing now, live streams. And yeah, man, if you want to join, then hit the subscribe button and let's discover and research things together, man.
With the Roswell thing, it always was with the MK Majestic 12 document that there's 4 dead aliens. And remember we talked to Walker about that. And he said, you guys are you're speculating, and almost everything you ever believe is wrong. How do you know they died? How do you know they didn't get up and walk away? And now we know this story that one of them, they got up and walked away. They just left the craft and walked away. And that the idea was at Roswell that the MJ-12 document is not accurate. It's maybe part of the document that they changed. There was 3 dead aliens and 1 live alien, because now you have all these people said there was a live alien and it was talking in their heads. And that was how they would know there was mental phenomena. So if you've got an alien that's talking in people's heads, and if you're an intelligence, you go, wow,
there's a mental aspect of it.
That. Yeah. Oh my God, we could go to Brezhnev and talk in his head, and we could tell him we're God, and and that's the whole thing. I wrote a book on ports where you see that they're into all this kind of stuff, because they did the ports, and there's actually a DIA document from 1973 that said if we could master this phenomenon of apportation, of moving things from one place to another, we could go to the Russians, we could go into the vault. We could get the documents, bring them to Washington, photocopy them, bring them back, put them in the vault, and they would never even know we were there.
That's right.
So you can tell, sure, if you're going to work on this kind of stuff, because it's got military applications.
And they absolutely did that, by the way, with Grill Flame, Sunstreak, Stargate, all of that's pretty much exactly what they were doing, was intelligence gathering, perceiving things at a distance remotely.
Yeah.
All right, let's dial it back to Hollowman. Hollowman Air Force Base, set it up here. What happens at this place? What happens afterwards? And what are the rumors?
Okay, so I knew Bob Emenegger, who was the co-producer on it. There was Bob Emenegger, who was the guy. He said I was the guy that did all the work. I mean, did all the music,
flying saucers, past, present, and future.
UFOs, past, present, future. Which later becomes UFOs. It has begun.
That's right.
And in UFOs begun, before I forget, I should mention that the top secret, or the Charlie Red Star video that got me involved is shown on that, but it's like 2 seconds. You can't really. And Jacques Vallée introduces this film, which is an amazing film. But anyway, so they did 2 versions, and then in 1983, according to Bob, there was a general who was Ronald Reagan's first agent in Hollywood, comes to him and said, "They liked what you did in '75. They'd like you to do another documentary." And then he says, "Is Reagan behind this?" He's trying to figure out, like, where's this coming from? And then they wanted Jacques Vallée and they wanted J.L. Hynek involved. And in '83, the general had said, they were there and they said, "Okay, Hynek's here. Get all the film out of the vault. Give him the film." And then Chartle, who was the security manager, said, "Sorry, General, I can't do that. I need a requisition. I can't just pull it out." "God damn, I'll have your ass. You get the film out and give it to Hynek." And it all fell apart, because what they wanted was they wanted Hynek and Jacques Vallée to be in the documentary and back it up. But Jacques Vallée already knew what happened in '75, and he knew that they would pull it at the last minute, and that would be the end of his career.
So what was on this film? For those listening who've never heard about Hollowman, let's say.
So '75, Bob goes to Norton Air Force Base. He gets called in. He has no interest in UFOs. He never had any, even after he was involved. He has no interest. He's a comedy guy. You watch Comedy Channel all the time. So he gets called in with his friend Sandler, and Sandler's the operator. He's the guy, CIA connections, FBI. He's got all these connections and stuff. And as his Bob Emenegger's wife said, he was, he wasn't very smart, but you could give him a stick and a piece of gum in the morning, and he'd come back at night with a pile of money. But he was so really good at operations. So he got the meeting set up. They went to Norton Air Force Base, and Paul Chartle comes up and he says, "It's the Vietnam War, and it's not going very well, and the American military isn't seen in a good light. We would like you to do this documentary on working with dolphins, 3D holography." And they gave him 8 different projects that military was working on that the people say, "That's pretty cool."
Distract people, boost morale.
Yeah, boost morale. And so they said, and then he says, "Oh, and we'd also like you to do this documentary on UFOs, and we'd like you to hide it under the other documentaries." And Bob Ebenegger going, "UFOs? You kidding me? UFOs?" And he said, "I used to tell my wife, Margaret, quit reading those stupid things. The alien had my baby." He thought his wife was crazy. And he said, "And now you're telling me this is real?" And he said, "Well, what would I tell you? What would you say if I told you there was a landing of a alien craft at Hollowman Air Force Base in May of 1971? Now, you'll hear other stories where they put out 64.
64, yeah.
Richard Doty put up 64.
Uh-huh.
Linda Howe was telling the story. So then you have this. That's what happens in the UFO situation, is in order for them to distract you from the story, they don't have to kill you. All they do is put a second story.
Linda Howe, I think we know her also from this CJ guy that has done an interview. I think he was also connected with this Linda Morton Howe. So she seems to be a person that a lot of these UFO guys, experiencers, get back to and work with her. Interesting.
In that has different details, and then suddenly it's like my version versus Linda Howe's version.
Playing 3D chess over here.
So I talked to Bob, and he said, "No, I'm telling you, it was May of, I guarantee you, May of 1971. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. There was 4 cameras. He's naming as if he had read the whole thing. He knew exactly what was going on. So he tells the story where they tell him you can go, and he said, I walked in the Pentagon. They were dealing with Colonel Coleman, who was the head of Air Force spokesman for the Air Force. Had flown after a UFO in World War II, had a background and stuff, and they went to Coleman, and they said they walked right into the Pentagon. They didn't sign in. They just walked right into the Pentagon, and the Pentagon guy said, what are you guys doing here? Every time you guys do this kind of stuff, the phone lines light up, and we got to deal with all this crap, and you guys are doing this all the time. And then Sandler says, what are you talking about? You guys invited us here. And then they said, oh, okay. And then they go, and Coleman says, first thing he says, I just want to warn you, if you see anything that's classified and you put it out, you could go to jail. And then they go, and then he tells them that, and then they go in the office, and he says, come on in, boys. And he starts talking as if nothing had happened. But so he was given a thing, and he said, who do you want to talk to? So they went to the guy at Blue Book, head of Blue Book. Yeah. They had, they were given the story of the channeling of the alien in 1959. They were dealing with Art Lundahl. Art Lundahl was the first head of the Weird Desk at the CIA. So the Weird Desk is where they handle all the paranormal phenomena, the psi stuff, the remote viewing, UFOs, all this kind of stuff. It's called the Weird Desk. So the first guy was Arthur Lundahl, who was a photo intelligence guy. He was the guy that ran the National Photographic Interpretation Center in Washington. That's where they analyzed the U-2, the SR-71, and all the spy photographs. So he was the guy in '62 during the Kennedy administration that went in when they were identifying missiles in Cuba. And it was Art Lundahl was saying, here's a missile launcher, here's a missile, and identifying to the president what all this stuff was. So that was his fame. And they channeled an alien at the Pentagon, which we can do later, but and they get the story. So they start gathering this stuff together for this documentary. And then he says to Lundahl, he says, can you go on camera and tell the story about the channeling at this CIA? And he said, no, I can't. And Bob says, well, we need someone to tell the story. I'm on duty. I can't. And so they brought in Robert Friend. And if you actually look at the documentary, Robert Friend actually tells the actual story that he gets called in 2 days later, and they say, you got to come and see this. And they go through the whole thing about the channeling and stuff like that. But I'll leave that for later. But anyway, so they're back to Bob. So Bob's there, and he starts gathering all this material, and he goes to see Weinbrenner, and Weinbrenner saying, they asked him, what's the deal? What's the deal with is the film at Hollowman Air Force Base, is that actually real? And then Weinbrenner gets up at the chalkboard, and he starts drawing this Russian MiG, and he says, what's the deal? The Russians get to know everything. We have to release all our stuff. And he's going, maybe he misunderstood my question. Maybe he didn't understand what I was trying to ask him. And then he pulls this book off the shelf, and it's J. Allen Hynek book, and he opens it up, and it's signed by J. Allen Hynek to him. And then he realizes, his room is tapped. He's not supposed to play he's playing the game and stuff like that. So they talk to all these guys, and they put the documentary together, and they get the Hollowman Air Force Base film. Now there's all this dispute whether Bob saw the film. He said he never saw the film. Sandler confirms that he actually saw the film. And then what happened is at the very end, they have all this material on different things like the launch at Vandenberg.
And can we go into what was on that film? What they saw?
So basically, it's 6 o'clock in the morning at Hollowman Air Force Base. A bunch of generals have been flown in from Washington for this event. It's completely known as to what's going to happen. It's all planned, and they're all sitting there. And so when I asked Bob, you mentioned the Steven Spielberg. So I said, as he was explaining this whole thing, the 3 UFOs come in, the 2 UFOs break off, the other one lands, these beings, the door opens up, these beings come out, everybody's waiting for them, and they shake hands, and then they put this UFO in a hangar, and Bob later goes to the hangar with this guy, and they break the lock off, and they look in the hangar, and of course there's nothing there, and stuff like that. And so that's the basic premise of what's on the
there's this sort of like, almost like it drops like a feather.
Yeah.
It was described as.
Yeah.
The other 2 break off, it drops a feather. Yeah. The door opens, there's no seam, and these beings come out, 3 beings, and being incredibly tall, wearing some garment on their head, like some Egyptian
But I'll tell
garb.
that part of the story later, because that happened later. So anyway, so they describe the beings. Anyway, they come out. And so I said to Bob, Bob, it's kind of weird, if it weren't for the location, the time of day, this sounds exactly like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he said, I didn't tell you? I said, no, you didn't tell me what? I didn't tell you I gave a copy to Spielberg in 1975? I said, no, you didn't tell me that. So
What?
Close Encounters comes out in 77. And it's the story of Close Encounters. That's where Spielberg got the thing.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Gave him a copy of what?
Of his documentary, and he wanted to see it. And then he said, I told you, Annie Spielberg worked for us. Annie Spielberg was a line producer for us. And I said, oh yeah, I forgot that. And they'd done a bunch of documentaries on.
So this is interesting, my boy. So, because considering this, imagine what he knows, man. And then imagine maybe we're gonna see something in this, in his new upcoming movie, Disclosure Day, where he also says, or where it says, you know, below the title Disclosure Day, it says we deserve the truth, or we deserve to know. And we do, man. So I'm wondering if he knows more, Mr. Spielberg, and his, I got the feeling, I'm very certain that he knows more. Low percentage wise, he doesn't know a lot, because this is the proof that he knows. But this is interesting, man. This is super interesting. Great thing, man.
And Life After Death and hypnosis and
Spielberg was involved.
His sister was involved. And then he says
they're all connected, bro.
And after it was over, after Close Encounters came out, Steven Spielberg's mother came to me and she said, she said, Bob, I've seen your version of The Landing and I've seen Steven's version of The Landing, and I like Steven's version better. She said that. He said, yeah, that's what she said. And so years later, so this whole thing, it sort of confirmed that this was real. And so then years later, I got a email from Michael Luckman. He wrote the first book on UFOs and music.
Sure.
He was a producer out of New York City. And he said, they hoaxed the whole thing. I said, what do you mean hoaxed the whole thing? And he sent me this photograph. And he said, you asked Bob to explain this. And he shows the photograph. And the beings that came out, they had this sort of a thing tied around their head. They had this antenna. They had a staff. They had the long nose and stuff. And I look at it, and it's a statue in a British museum. And I'm going, it's the same thing. That's it. If you look at the photograph, I sent you the photograph.
Whoa.
I sent you the photograph,
Yeah.
but if you look at the photograph in the book and the photograph, identical.
Whoa.
So I went, holy cow. He said, they faked the whole thing. They faked the whole thing. And I said, oh, okay, I'll ask Bob. So I went to Bob. I said, Bob, this is kind of weird here. You take a look at this. Like, what do you say to this? He's making this accusation, and it does look pretty close, Bob. And then he says, well, he didn't no interest. He said, oh, okay, I'll talk to Alan. It's because Alan's the manipulator guy. So he goes to Alan, and this email comes back. We'll sue them, man. We'll sue them. Just get ready. I mean, we're going to sue these guys. Who does the hell is these things people think they are? And then this guy died of a stroke. So the story sort of died. But the one when you see it, so what happened is when the film came out, they pulled the film back. So Coleman says to them, he says, we can't let the film. It's the Vietnam War. Time isn't right. We got to pull the film, which is what they did to Disney. Right. Disney did a documentary, the same thing. He was going to get a bunch of film and stuff, and they pulled all that from him at the last minute as well. And Disney did it. It was never released, but Disney did a documentary. So they had to pull it, and he said, I told you a story. These two heavy set people, they're in this little tiny Datsun, and they got to drive from California back to the Pentagon to deliver this film. And then there was 8 seconds. So if you've seen the UFOs Past, Present, Future, it says this may have happened in the past or it may happen in the future. And they're forced to storyboard the thing. So they're sort of telling the story and they're sort of doing this stuff. And all of a sudden you see this UFO coming over the mountain and it's coming in and the rumor gets going. And I proposed this rumor. I pushed it as well, that there's 8 seconds of the actual film that they had allowed it to be put in there. So I went to Bob and I said, Bob, there's 8 seconds of film in that documentary. And he said, well, yeah. And I said, well, why is that in there? Why did it give you the thing? He said, well, it didn't show anything. And I said, well, it didn't show anything, but it still doesn't make sense. They give you this thing. And the dispute went back and forth. And he said, and then suddenly some guy contacts, I hear that the guy's got a high def version of the documentary. And he said that it was an F4. And I look at it, and it is an F4. It looks like an F4 coming in over the mountain. But the thing is, it doesn't agree with the story. And so Bob was telling the truth. So it didn't agree with the story because the story was there was 3 UFOs came in, right, and then only 1 landed. This is only 1 UFO coming in, which is not the same story. And you can see it's an F4. And then you see this being that is out of a British museum. As in the way he said, I said, what happened? He said, okay, Shardle described it because Shardle saw the film. Charles described it to my storyboard guy, and my storyboard guy was describing the being. So he was describing this being, but he was describing this being out of the British Museum, and they put it in the book and they put it in the documentary and stuff like that. And basically what it was that I thought the government had given them 8 seconds of legitimate film, they'd given them 8 seconds of garbage, and they'd given them a phony alien picture to put in there, and none of that was true. There was all this fake that Emmett Egger had put this stuff out. So the picture that's in the book is a confabulation. It's a statue, identical statue in the British Museum, and the other is an F4. If you see the high definition version, it is a plane.
So we have nothing.
And that's what they want. So that's the thing. They put it out, they pull it back.
But this video did exist.
It still does exist, and J. Allen Hynek went after it. Not J. Allen Hynek. Well, I guess he was looking at for it as well. But the people that were really looking at it was the NIDS people. So what NIDS had was Bob Bigelow had a lot of money. So what he did is what do you do if you've got a lot of money? You pull in the best people you can. Kate Green.
And this is what I mean, man. So much disinformation, dude. It's so hard to find legitimate stuff. It's crazy. People just want to suppress information, and maybe, imagine, they do this all to keep us entertained, you know? So we always want to look for more truth, but at some point we're just not gonna get really any further. And this is how I feel at the moment, because there are so many whistleblowers, so many people, but what did we got? Like, what is there any 100% credible thing that is out there where we can for 100% really know and say we know that this is real? I feel like there's always this, to a certain degree, it's very much likely that this is the case, that this and this story is real, but we never really, That's kind of sad, man, after so many years, but, well, again, let's wait for further drops of UFO files. Maybe we get something. Maybe we get...
Put off at the top of all the categories, and you try to figure it out. So they were working, and that's where the Wilson Davis leak came from. The Wilson Davis notes was they were looking at this thing and saying they knew that the meeting had taken place, and they were trying to between Greer and the Admiral. And did this meeting actually take place? So that's why they set up the meeting between Eric Davis and the General to get all the details.
To get some more information.
And it becomes the Wilson, but they were working on black triangles, they were working on Kelvin mutilations, and they were working on Hollowman Air Force Base.
Yeah.
So because I knew Bob Emmeniger very well, and I've interviewed him piles of times, Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis were coming to me and trying to get material. What did Bob tell you? What did he tell you about this part of the thing? And then the story was that when they showed the documentary, Christopher Dodd, Senator Christopher Dodd, had seen the documentary, and he was getting under pressure from his constituents, and he filed on FOIA to get the Hollowman Air Force Base film. And he was told it was in a Navy sink. And I've never figured out what a Navy sink is. And Hal actually used that expression as well. But they're all trying to figure this thing out. And so one of the parts of the story that people don't know, it's sort of leaking out now, is that Eric Davis, who's the sharpest knife in the drawer and has worked diligently inside his sort of little classified world to find higher levels and what those people know and stuff like that. He calls me one time and he says, "Hey, you got Jimmy Carter's phone number?" And I go, "No, I got, what do I have Jimmy Carter's phone number? Canadian, man. What do I have Jimmy Carter's phone number?" And I said, "What do you want Jimmy Carter's phone number for?" He said, "Well, I just talked to Ford and I talked to Bush. And there's this rumored story when Carter was in, there was an NPR guy who was doing a documentary, and I found his files in Washington at the National Security Archives. And it talked about this documentary, and it talked about this Secret Service guy who claimed that he had been in the Carter briefing and that he was shown a 15-minute color film. So this is the whole deal. Is this the Hollowman film?" So they wanted to talk to Carter, but nobody could get a hold. The reason he got a hold of Ford and Bush was because all three of them, Davis and these two presidents, are members of the Former Intelligence Officers Association. So they, talk to each other, and they have phone numbers and stuff like that. So he had their phone numbers. So he told me back this 20 years ago, and now he's made public the fact he talked to Bush, and that Bush had confirmed, yes, he had seen the film.
Yeah.
But he didn't see it as CIA. He didn't see it in his presidential intelligence briefing, president-elect intelligence briefing. He had seen it as he saw it as CIA director. And that the guy that was giving him the briefing didn't realize he hadn't been briefed on it. And that when he was puzzled, he said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And then the guy suddenly realized, oh no, he's never been briefed. He's never been briefed on this. And so he told him the story. And so they were asking, a lot of skeptics like Oberg and Phil Klass and people were putting out things. It was a flame out of an A-12. It was this. It was all these explanations as to what happened at Hollowman Air Force Base. And so that's what Davis was asking Bush. He said, was it a psychological operation? No. Was it a training film? No. Was it a flame out of an A-12? No. Was it this? Was it that? And then he said, it was real. It was the real deal. And there was massive security. That's what he told Eric Davis. So Eric Davis has sort of told that story about Bush being told. And then the other part of the story he hasn't sort of told yet is that he also talked to Ford. And that Ford had said, yes, he saw the film as when he was briefed as president. He saw the whatever film, the Hollowman Air Force Base film, and during his briefing. And then Eric Davis asked him, well, when was the briefing? And he said, I'm never going to tell you where the briefing was. Don't even go there. And so this is the thing. They confirmed. That's why you always hear, if you hear Hal Puthoff or Eric Davis talk, they say, we have confirmed the Hollowman Air Force Base film. The film actually exists. But the most important part, and you may not know this story. So I'm talking to Bob one time and I said, okay, so
dude, I feel like this is the first time he was actually breathing. The way his brain is working, he just like boom. Dude, this spitting, he's spitting he's spitting something. And no break for this, bro. Whew. But yeah, dude, this is what I'm saying. It's like people telling people that heard something of this guy and we have to deal with it. And then we are fighting over things that we have no clue of if this is even real at all, you know? So yeah, man, always got to be skeptical, always question everything.
They had to send the film back. Yep, they sent the film back. And he told me the whole story about the guys in the car and stuff like that. So I say to him, Bob, you said you got all sorts of stuff. You got access. Yeah, there was no cover up. They let us see whatever we want. We had film from NASA. They gave us all sorts of stuff. And I said, so he sent the Hollowman film back. Remember that film you were talking about the Vandenberg where they shoot the missile up and the UFOs take it out?
Bob Jacobs.
I said, yeah. He said, I remember that. I said, did you give that film back? And because he had it analyzed by the guy that analyzed the Robertson panel UFOs back in the 1950s, the top analyst. He said it's 1 in a million. 1 in a million that this ain't a UFO. And so I said, you give that film back? And he goes, no, I don't think so. I said, you didn't give it back? And he said, no, I think Alan's got it. I'll check. So he cuts back to me, says, yeah, Alan's got it. I said, Alan's got this film? He said, yeah, it's top secret. It's top secret. It has Nolan's name on the cover of the canister. And so I was, at that time I was working with Angela Joyner. Angela Joyner broke the Stevensfield, Texas story and got fired and never worked again.
Wow.
Just destroyed her life. Absolutely destroyed her life. Anyway, so I'm working with her on a presidential book, which we never did finish off, but we were working on it. I was down in Texas. And so then I says, Angela, they got the film. Angela, we get the film. We'd be famous, man. This will be worldwide. We got this film of this is the
smoking gun.
Everybody's been talking about this film where they take this missile out, or these UFOs. And Bob talked about it. He said the missile was going, and these little white moons were going around it,
right,
around this craft, and just
zapping it,
and zapping it. And I said, we got the film. Sandler's got the film. And so she was kind of girl that you went in a bar, you tried to buy her a drink. And she was last cut on the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Right.
So Bob kind of like women, and Angela was talking to him, and he makes the arrangement for Angela to see this film. But the problem is that Angela has to go by herself. I can't go. It's Oregon. Sandler's got the vault in Oregon. So she has to go by herself. And she's, I don't know if I want to go, by myself to see Sandler at his house and stuff like that. And so she doesn't know what to do. So then she's in contact because everybody's covering the Stevensville story. So James Fox is covering the Stevensville story. And she says, James, we got this film. And Alan Sandler's got the film. And James goes, what? What's this? You got a film? So then James contacts him. So I find the film, and I'm saying, what'd you tell James? We had this thing to ourselves. Like, what did you tell James Fox for? So James Fox, and he goes and deals with Sandler. He talks to Sandler, and Sandler says, yeah, I got the film. And he says, can I see it? I want to put it in my documentary. And he said, no, you're going to need some money. And he said, well, how much? He said, $25,000. He said, okay, hang on. And so I don't know how long it took him, months or whatever. Gathers the $25,000. It goes back to Sandler, and he says, okay, I got the $25,000. I want to use it in my film. And he says, no, I talked to my lawyer. My lawyer says, Alan, you're pretty well off. You don't need $25,000. This is going to ruin your life. Do not sell for $25,000. You're never going to hear the end of it. And so and he's going, oh, okay. So it's in Fox, and this is in the process now. It should have happened by now, but he goes to Congress. And he tells Congress, all the congressional hearings and stuff, he says, there's this film. It's a top secret film. Alan Sandler's got this film in his vault. And then the question comes down, Alan Sandler's got a classified film. So then the contact,
they can subpoena.
They then go back. This is the whole deal. They're trying to get it. So the deal that Fox, when I heard one interview he did, he said he made the deal with Congress that if they gave him he'd help them get the film if they gave him a copy of the film. And I figured, well, I should get a copy. I'm the one who found the thing. So this is the deal that's going on right now.
No way.
Congress knows about this film.
Whoa.
And Sandler's in a position where he has to give it up because it's classified material.
He'll get arrested.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
this is.
Dude, this boy, I'm saying, bro, he just say blah, 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 and oh my goodness, he knows so much, man. The way he's talking is so funny also. His brain is working fast, man. Definitely faster than mine.
That's pretty breaking.
Definitely.
Man. I mean, they should pay him, first of all. They should just give the man some money. I'd be willing to throw up some cash as well. I'll go in with whoever wants to go in with me.
Talk to James Fox and see just to see where it stands.
Because
this is going back at least 6 months when I last heard James.
Wow. So when James was visiting, when James was in a skiff, essentially, because I had heard he'd said on this podcast that he met with Congress right after the congressional hearing. That came up, I guess. I guess them chasing that thing might have.
I'm not sure. I just know that he had made contact with and made this deal with Congress to try to shake this film loose. And this is a film that everybody knows. And it's pretty clear, according to Bob.
Oh, yeah. According to Bob, this is like crystal clear.
And that was a film that he saw. He always claimed he didn't see the Hollowman film. But he did claim he's seen this UFO being taken down.
Do you know who else claims to have seen it?
I think
Chris Bledsoe.
Oh, because I know that Elizondo claims to.
Dude, Chris Bledsoe. And you always stumble across the same names. Chris Bledsoe. Now he's saying Louis Elizondo. Man, it's... Imagine they're all just playing, bro. They're all just playing to fool us. To keep us in this, circle. As I said, looking for stuff. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And then there are a lot of people that are involved where me personally, I like them. I don't know them, first of all. But I like their, videos overall. But to some degree, I'm always like, who are you? Where are you coming from? Why are you so successful? Where's all your money coming from? It's like Jesse Michaels, for example. We all know that there's this connection to Peter Thiel going on, right? So Peter Thiel and Jesse Michaels, they're kind of related. And there's this whole, also Chris Ramsey and stuff like that. There's this whole plot of, let's say, modern UFO researchers, which have like big platforms on YouTube at the moment, and they're kind of dominating the whole scene, I feel like. And also we have Louis Elizondo, and it's super hard to say what is going on. You just have to listen to yourself, pretty much. Like, your intuition is super precious at the moment, man. So don't be fooled by anyone.
Seen it too.
Yeah, Chris Bledsoe told me, I was asking him about Tim Taylor and his just sort of his interactions with him and what that was like. Like, what did he show you? Because apparently he showed up to his house and gave him a classified briefing, sort of your eyes only for the Bledsoes. And I think Chris and his wife, or maybe even just Chris. And then, Chris even caught sort of forwarding some of it. And then they caught him through his email being like, hey, we said your eyes only. Yeah. And I said, what did he show you in that briefing? He's like, oh, photos and videos. I was like, videos. I'm like, did he show you, this video of the rocket being taken out? And he goes, yeah. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah, he showed me that. And I go, what else? And then he goes, can't say anymore. There is a famous video out there of one of these UFOs or objects or whatever it is taking down one of these rockets that they were shooting up.
I've seen it.
Who showed this to you?
Taylor did.
Following one such test launch, Lieutenant Jacobs was unexpectedly told to report to the office of Major Florenz Mansman.
On the screen was the film we had shot. The nose cones separate. The shaft flew out in front of it. We saw this as obviously reflections of light rippling like that. And then we saw the dummy warhead flying along. It's going between 6,000 and 8,000 miles an hour at that point, and it's on the fringe of space. And suddenly, into that frame, an object flew in, chasing the chaff, the warhead, and so on, at the same speed. And in polar orbit, it fired a beam of light at the warhead. The beam of light struck that. The object flew up, shot another beam of light at the dummy warhead, went around, shot another beam of light at it, went down, shot a beam of light, and then flew out the same way it had come in. At which time, the dummy warhead fell out of the frame. The lights came on, and Major Mansman said to me, "Were you guys screwing around up there?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "What was that?" And I said, "It looks like we got a UFO." And he said, "Lieutenant Jacobs, you are never to speak of this again. It never happened."
Yeah, quite a few. I saw. There's things I don't want to talk about.
So I don't know. Maybe they showed him the Maybe they showed him the Hollowman thing too.
Floating around. I got some good stories about Tim Taylor and Chris as well. Because I was involved with Chris before he was famous. I was 2012. I was involved with him.
Wow. And his interaction happened in 2008. So that was right around the time. That was after MUFON.
2007. Yeah.
2007. Right. Right before the big housing crash and everything else. Okay, we can get into that. I think that's really interesting. Anything else on the Hollowman stuff you want to go over? Or is that pretty much covered?
That pretty much covers the.
So we know that the beings don't look like these sort of long-nosed Egyptian things.
Exactly.
And we know that footage used in that documentary is also just bunk.
Yes, you can. If you're editing this, I sent you the photograph. You can actually put the photograph and then take the photograph out of the book.
Yeah,
and put them together, and you just go like, wow.
Yeah,
that's what I said. Like I'd always believe Bob, and I'm thinking maybe he was pulling my leg the whole time.
You know what though?
Sense.
I mean, because also, you know, you never hear about these type of beings, right? You always hear about, especially in and around the military. It's either the grays or the tall whites is another one of them. So I'd imagine they were like. Probably something, it would probably have to be one of those two.
There was one more story. I better do it before I forget. There's a story that there's always a story about, because I do the presidents, about are the presidents briefed, do they know and stuff. So there was a story. Linda Howe tells a story. So Linda Howe and Bob used to have a huge house in Hollywood, and so
it's nice for them.
She goes there with Larry Bryant, I think, and Bob starts showing her stuff.
Evan
Egger's house.
Okay.
So they're there, and he shows her a document from Richard Nixon and says it had to do with the documentary. And it said, "Thank you for your cooperation on the project we worked on." So Linda's been telling the story numerous times. And, I asked Bob about it, and he said, "Well, no, I had this letter." And he sent me this Nixon letter, which was a letter that Nixon sent out when he first became president, saying, "If you got any friends that are, worthy to work on my presentation, give me references and stuff like that." And then Linda said, "No, that's not the document I saw." And so we had one incident at Eureka Springs where Linda says, "Come on, you want to go for dinner? We're going with Bob and his wife, and I'm going to get it out of him." And I go, "Okay." So we go there, and I'm with Angela Joyner, and we're sitting there, and Linda can be ruthless. I mean, she's just going after him, and I'm going, and Bob's got his head down. He's not saying anything. His wife's got her head down. No comment, no denials, nothing, just sitting there, all sheepishly looking. He's just throwing down, and she's just going, "Come on, Bob, admit it, Bob. You showed me that document. It's time that you open up and admit it." And she's going on, and then I says to Angela, I said, "Okay, we're gone. I'll leave you, Bob, to Linda." Linda didn't talk to me for 2 years. She thought I was thinking that she was making fun of Bob, and I was laughing because she was not giving
him up.
She was just going, and she was trying to get this, and she thought I was laughing at her. And I said, "No, it didn't do with that." And so now we're friends again. But it was this letter that was there, and then when I found he had died, I thought. I got an email from him, and I go, "Oh, I should talk to him." And I went and then didn't answer. And then I'm going, "This is weird." And then I checked, and sure enough, he died. And his wife died first, and then he died. I'm going, "But I got an email from this guy." It was just so weird. And then I knew he had a daughter. He had one daughter, lived in LA, and he always complained that she had problems with her checks or with her credit cards and all this stuff. And then I'm thinking, "Oh, I got to get his files." Because they're not going to know. You're going to get the files, and you're going to get a document. Like when at Stanton Friedman's files, I was the first guy to Stanton Friedman's files, because everybody keeps stuff secret. They got stuff that's stashed away, and they make agreements with people. And then when you get their files, there's the document, there's all that stuff. And so I went and I was trying to find the files. I still can't find his files. Well, Bob Emmerger's files are maybe around somewhere, and they may have this letter from Richard Nixon and it was signed by Richard Nixon, and Angela and Linda has a photographic memory.
Oh, so, what a document that would be to uncover.
Yeah. So that was the weird thing. But Chris was another one where I got involved almost at the beginning. I didn't know who he was.
Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah, I got involved. There was an event, I don't know if you know what it was called, The Gathering. And this guy Larry out of Pennsylvania had a fair bit of money, and he was sort of like Bigelow. He's helping researchers and stuff like that. He had a big event where he'd bring in all these researchers. I think there's 50 researchers and their wives into Philadelphia, and then he brought his family in, and then it was all these questions. So all these experts are answering these questions in front of his family. So to say to his family, see, I'm not nuts. Look, all these researchers here, experts and stuff like that. And so we were in there, and that's when I first met him. We were on a bus coming in from the airport, and his wife Vaughn was there, and Chris, all these people gathered around Chris, and they're all asking him questions. I'm going, who is this guy? And they're all just interested. And then I was talking to his wife. She says, oh, this is Chris's story. This I'm not really interested. This is Chris's story. Here's my daughter, and his daughter's singing and dancing, and she's talking about her daughter all the time. So we hung out with his wife the whole weekend.
Yvonne's a sweetheart too.
Yeah, and we just walked around with his wife and talked stories. And then so when I was doing the citizens hearing in 2013. And I was lecturing down in Florida. So then I realized that Chris's house is only like 5 miles off the interstate. And I go, hey, Chris, I'm going right past your place. Can I stop in and see you? And he says, yeah, sure. So I wanted to see this burning tree, this whole idea that Warner Brothers had a documentary they wanted to do, and they wanted a sign and give us a sign. And then the night before they were going to call it off, suddenly the tree starts to burn. And then the Chad and Carrie Hughes, the two scriptwriters for Warner Brothers, say, that's what we're waiting for. Then we're going to do the movie. And then they were going to do the movie, and then it got blocked by Chris keeping saying, we won't let you have the end of the movie. And they say, no, you can't do that, Chris. You can't have the end of the movie. We control the end of the movie. And Tom DeLonge wanted to put reptilians in the end of his version of Chris Blatzel's story. And Chris kept saying, no, that's not the story. The story is the message from the lady. You're not going to change the story. And Hollywood just saying, no, that's not going to sell. And so I wanted to see the tree. So I'm taking the pictures of the burning tree and the circle that was around it. And I actually see the thing where the thing's in the bush, and he's got his hand against this oak tree, and the oak tree's completely died. When he saw the being that came through the bush, after the event happened, when he got home, he was leaning against this tree, and then he said to the being, okay, you got me. And then the being says, we mean no harm. And then boom, his dog comes, and the being disappears, and the dog goes racing after this being. So dude, I saw the tree, and I saw the burning tree and stuff. So I got it. And then the first paranormal event happened. Chris doesn't have this in his book, but he was limited by a number of words. Plus we had a bit of a disagreement about what happened in this event. So we're sitting there, and his wife had
This is about the dog.
Yeah, this is the dog story. So his wife had gone. All four of the kids were out of the house getting haircuts and stuff. We were by ourselves. And he's got three dogs. He's got the big Nellie, which is a big black lab. He had this medium-sized Heinz 57 type dog. And then his little Chihuahua. So these three dogs, big, small, and middle. And we're sitting there and playing on Facebook, and he's telling me the story where I was asking about owls. Like I said, hey, you ever had any owl experiences? He said, yeah, that was when I was sitting right on top of the antenna. And what the story was, wasn't talking to his family, but he was talking to all these CB guys driving around on trucks. But he had talked to his family for a year because they said, you're not to talk to the kids about this. I don't want to hear about it. And he was like, he didn't, and nobody to talk to. So he's talking to these truckers, and he was sitting in this chair, and he had got up to go to the front door for something. And the lightning hit the tower and came down right where this chair was. He would have been dead if he had stayed in the chair. And I said, oh, that was the aliens. They were warning you. That's why the owl was on top of the towers to get away from that chair. They wanted you to get back. And that's when he started to get back in. They burnt the back half of the house down. The back half of the house was burned down. And that's when he started to get back into UFOs. But so I looked at the tree, and we're sitting there, and I'm ready to go to Florida. And I say, Chris, I think it's about time to go. And now Chris says, hey, what are you guys doing back in the room? And I look, and the three dogs are standing there looking at us, He said, how'd you get back in the house? And then I didn't mean anything to me. And so he goes and the front door is wide open. And he puts them outside. He says, that's weird. Go outside, get outside, puts them outside. And then I take my bag and I say, well, I'll see you, Chris. I'll drop back on my way back. He said, great, because he's an absolutely beautiful guy, wonderful host and stuff. And his family is all very receptive and all talk to me and stuff like that.
Yeah, they had me over too. Same deal.
So I got in the car, and I took off, and I get to Florida. And then he says, I opened the email, and there's an email from Chris. He said, you know what? It happened twice more after you left. You left, and then I was sitting in the living room, and the dogs are back in the house. And I went, and the front door was wide open. And then I put them back outside again. I went to the bathroom. I came out of the bathroom. Dogs are back in the house again. And I go, whatever, you left the door open. It's like, yeah, doesn't mean nothing to me. So this is my interpretation of the story. So anyway, I sloughed it off. So I'm going back, head back, my rental car back to Washington. I'm coming back. I stopped. I said, I want to look at the tree again. And took some more photographs of the tree. And then we're standing on this back patio. Remember, there's this concrete patio in the back there. we're standing there, and Nellie's right behind us. I remember he turned around and said, "What are you chewing on?" She had this gourd, and he said, "Oh, you've chewed it already." And she's chewing on this gourd. She's maybe 6-7 feet away from us. And so then he says, "You want to go in the house?" I said, "Yeah, okay." So we go, and you know, a dog always wants to get in the house before you. So we start going. Chris is here, I'm here, and the dog comes on my left-hand side. I got these light-colored blue jeans on, and we start going for the door, and the dog runs by me, and all I hear is Chris saying, "Nellie, what happened to you?" And I look, and
those blood spouting everywhere,
shooting up like a hidden artery all over the walls. And
I think I actually have the original pictures of this too, which is interesting because I remember talking to Chris about this, and this is a few years ago, and he goes, "You got to talk to Grant Cameron about this because he was there." And then, those are your jeans?
That's my jeans. Yeah. And that's where the story comes into me.
Yeah. January 12th, 2007 at 9:20 a.m.
So if a dog...
I swear, man, all these people are kind of connected to each other, and like they're in this whole bubble of happenings, bro. Usually I'm not really thinking about this too much, but seriously, imagine they're all kind of involved, man, and they're just playing on us, right? This would be... What an interesting thought. Not saying it is the case, but imagine. Dude, it could be like just theater, basically.
Runs by you. Yeah, how long does it take you? Half a second? Take a look at the jeans. It
Yeah.
looked like I'd been standing there for 10 minutes, shooting blood all over my pants. And so Chris was calling. He says, Chris, bring me a knife. I got to cut off the collar. And then Nellie just quickly, she's lying down. She's very calm. She's just lying there, and the blood's all over the place. And the girlfriend's cleaning the blood off the floor and off the walls. And I could see the blood coming down the stairs. And I'm thinking, oh, this is weird. And when the door was being left open, it wasn't weird, but this is weird. I go run into the car, and I get my camera, and I come back, and I start photographing where the blood, we've got the rag on top of the dog's head. The rag's all full of blood. And then we're talking, and I said, well, we should take it to the vet. And I'm thinking, well, we're talking, we'll be dead before I get to the vet. It's losing so much blood. Because he puts his hand on, and then Chris's son comes out. So Chris had an experience. I don't know if he told you about.
Chris Sr.?
No, well, Chris Sr. told this story about him crawling under the trees to go to this thing, and it had this force field around it. He couldn't get close enough to the craft, and he had his gun, and he was tired of this, and he was going close to the craft. And then he backed off, and he went away, and he said, "I'm going back." And he crawled under these trees again towards the craft. It was in this clearing, and he got a certain point, and he couldn't get any farther. The force field was there, and then he backed up, and he's coming back onto his property. There's a fence, a wire fence. And as he's crawled down, and as he's got this gun, and he looks up, and the white beings with the red eyes, there was 2 of them standing there looking at him. And he said he was never so embarrassed in his life. And that was it. He never touched the gun after that. So he gave all his guns to Chris Jr. And he had all this. And so Chris Jr. comes out. He's like going to take down bin Laden or something. He comes running out of the house with this semi-automatic rifle. It's like that. That raccoon. And I said, Chris, there's no raccoon. I said, we were standing right here. And then I'm going to get that dog. I'm going to shoot him. And he's got this gun. He's all really wound up. And I said, well, we're right here. If it had been a dog or a dog, anything,
porcupine,
we would have heard it. This is right behind us. It never happened. So then me and Chris are looking around where the blood started. We could see it started off the edge of the patio. There's a little 2 drops of blood. And then it came. And then my interpretation was when it came by me, the whole thing was me. It was like, you weren't impressed. You weren't impressed because you weren't impressed with the dogs being let out of the house. Watch this. And so it was like, it was meant for me because, and I argued with Chris about this. I said, you know what happened, Chris? He said, no, I think it was the shadow people. So I said, shadow people? Why would the shadow people cut the dog? And he said, well, they're evil. And I said, well, how do you know they're evil? He said, well, they're dark. I said, well, because they're dark doesn't mean they're evil. And I said, you know what I think happened, Chris? I said, they were letting the dogs out of the house when I was there. And I was impressed. So they said, you want to see this? Watch this. Because you see my pants. It was there was no blood on anybody else next to me. It was just all over my pants. And it was, they wanted this in the movie. Because it's like the old idea of a movie. You need good and bad. You need up and down in a movie.
This comes back to the wow theory again.
Yeah. If you have like God in with his popcorn in a movie, and it's like, I love you, I love you, I love you too, I love you. And God goes, I'm going to go watch next door and watch Star Wars. This is good.
I want to see some drama.
Yeah. You want the up and down. You always need the up and down. So I said, they want this in the movie. They want this. And he said, no, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I said, yeah, I think they want this story. They want the burning tree. They're doing all this crazy stuff where everybody's going to go, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe this happened. And then, but 2 weeks later, he phones me up and he says, you still got those photos? Warner Brothers would like this photograph. I told you.
Before jumping there, like he gets the blood to stop.
Yeah, he gets the blood to stop. He
puts his hand on it.
Pulls his hand up with this rag. And then Nellie just gets up and she just goes racing around the house. So I figured, oh, wow, what's going to happen next? I got my camera and I chase after Nellie. She goes around the house to the front door. She barks one time at the front door and then goes racing off into the next door neighbor's yard, barking as if she's chasing something. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, but there was nothing really happened. And that when Chris said, he said that there was a wound, but we didn't check the wound when I was there. Him and his father checked the wound that night, and they couldn't find a wound on.
That's what he told me. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't find a wound on neck. So that he said at that point he could heal people, and he was able to heal people. And then comes the really bizarre stuff. So we're
the really bizarre stuff. So this was all just the beginning, and not the real bizarre stuff, dude. I swear, man. That's what I mean. Like, what is happening to those guys? I'd like to have like one small thing of this, like a low percentage of this, just to see that it's there, man, you know?
I only meet him a few times, and he can't talk to me because I'm in Canada. He can't do stuff by email and stuff like that. So I meet him at an experiencer conference in Maine. So he's there, and Chris is like some of my friends. They don't go to the lectures. They just sit in the hallway and talk to people. So Chris is in the hallway talking to people. This woman comes up to him.
Dude, sometimes, I'm sorry. Sometimes I wish they would just burp. You know, I've seen this guy like, and he was just like, you know, would be kind of fun. Gotta be honest with you. Just to let it out, man.
There's twins. These women are twins. They're in their 70s. Two women. One woman says, my sister here, she had a stroke. She can't hear. She's totally deaf. Can you heal her? And Chris is standing out in front of the hotel. Suddenly, his cell phone, there's Tim Taylor. Tim Taylor says, if you're ever in front of a hotel and someone needs a healing, go ahead and do it.
No way.
Yeah. So he says, I don't know.
Wait a second. Hold on a second.
It gets weirder.
This is so strange.
It gets weirder.
So he's standing in front of the hotel. He has these twins come up. She says, my sister had a stroke. She can't hear. And in that minute, he gets a text from Tim Taylor. And he's alone here with these women?
I don't know Tim Taylor.
Pretty much, well, there may have been other people, but not in the conversation.
And
I don't know Tim Taylor, to be honest.
Saying Tim Taylor texted him.
Well, he showed me the text.
He showed you the text.
He showed me the text. Look, like Tim Taylor. And I'm thinking, was Tim psychic? Like, what's going on?
Whoa.
Tim's this weird guy, but
yeah.
And so then he tells me the story, and he puts his hands on her ears, and he says, in the name of Jesus, like I already said, in the name of Jesus, I heal you, or whatever. And this woman goes into my lecture, and she comes out of the lecture, and she says, I can hear everything said. I can hear. And I said, that's pretty cool, Chris. So then these two girls, one is Mike Cullen's former girlfriend, and there's a woman out of New Jersey who came to me after this event took place. So they're going to ask Chris for healing. So at lunchtime, all the people from the conference go to this restaurant across the street. So I'm with them, and these two girls are sitting beside Chris, and I realize they're going to ask for this healing. So there's me, and Mike might have still been there. Mike Clown might have still been there, but I'm not sure. But anyway, I figured it's a private moment. They want to do this. So I said, okay, Chris, I'm going back to the lectures. I'll catch you later. See you girls. And I took off. This girl comes back, and she's distraught. She's like, holy, you can't believe what happened. And I talked to her maybe 4 or 5 days ago again. And I said, can you repeat this story, what happened in the restaurant? She said, it was like a third person was in the conversation. She says, it was like, Tim Taylor, Tim Taylor, Tim Taylor. And she's going, and she said, I looked at I couldn't read the messages or whatever. And I said, that is the story I heard. And then the part of the story that you have to ask Chris that they brought up, and this was the fact that the phone was a transmitter phone, that he had been given this phone. I don't know if this is true. He'd been given this phone. It was a transmitter phone because you remember that
it was tapped.
Well, it was a transmitter phone. It was everything that he did was being recorded by somebody.
Right.
And I don't know that part of the story is true.
He might have been given that phone by Tim.
As soon as I heard that story, I went, that's how Tim
Taylor. That's how he did. Yeah, he isn't psychic at all. He's just tapping his phone.
And that's what Chris had said. I mean, remember the story when Tim Taylor comes and he said, you guys have ruined my life. What are you doing on my property? My family won't talk to me. They're trying to take my kids away from me. You've ruined my life. What are you doing here? And then Tim Taylor says to him, well, Chris, it appears they like you. They're all around you, Chris. They don't like us. They don't talk to us. Mm-hmm. So we're here to find out what are they telling you. And what's the best way to engage somebody is to follow what they're doing. And that's what happened when I met Tim Taylor. So I guess it'd be later than that summer, a rich business guy out of New Jersey, has a cottage, or may have built a big log cabin in Pennsylvania. So I get invited, and I'm the only guy with no money there, and we're there, and Chris is there, and he's showing these guys this contract from Warner Brothers again. And it has all sorts of money in this thing. And they're saying, no, don't take royalties. They're not going to make any money. Take money up front and stuff like this. And he keeps saying, I want control of the end of the movie and all this sort of stuff. And they were talking to him, and suddenly Tim Taylor shows up. And it was my friend that invited him. So my friend is a big business guy out of Winnipeg. And he was at a conference, same thing. He doesn't go to lectures. He just sits in the hall and talks to people. So he ran into Tim Taylor. And they got to be friends, and they were talking and stuff. And then he says to Tim Taylor, he says, hey, we're going on a UFO dig. You want to come along? And Tim goes, yeah, sure. So they go to the Gerald Anderson's case.
Okay.
So Gerald Anderson is there, and Tim Taylor interviews him, and they're pulling up this metal. And I still remember my friend. Now he won't talk. He's forgotten everything. He's forgotten everything that happened. Tim Taylor said, when they got some of this metal, he said, this is the real deal. And he was all excited. He was taking some of this material back with him. So that's where this whole thing comes about the gifting field. Whether he was at the gifting field or whether he was at another UFO crash or whatever. So that's how my friend knew him. So he shows up at
what year was that?
It would be 2013. 2013, 2014. So I met Chris in 2000. That would be at least 2013.
Okay.
And so anyway, Tim comes to this meeting, and he's only there for a while. He's there morning, afternoon, evening, suddenly disappears. I don't think he stays one night at the cabin. He's going back, he's flying. And according to Chris, he had only come to see Chris.
Yeah.
He wanted to get Chris's details because he wanted to meet up with Chris.
Mm-hmm.
So he was there, and I told people, like, my conversations with him, I said, if I had known who he was, I would have paid attention.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know who he was.
No.
I just knew he was a NASA guy.
And now that you know who he is, you're not going to get the opportunity.
Because it's just what he does. So I had the download experience. So we talked about downloads.
Yeah.
And he talked about the invention. So he gets this invention. He's got 40 patents.
Yeah.
He has this protocol where he doesn't drink. He doesn't do any of that kind of stuff. He sleeps for 8 hours. He gets up. He goes to bed for an hour again. And then he gets up and then takes a tall glass of water and he sits on the porch in the sun. And he starts to drink the water. And then he's in contact with, he calls them the beings or whoever. He doesn't call them aliens, whatever. And they give him these inventions. So the first one came. And I remember talking about it because I had the download. I guess I told him about my download experience. And so he told me about the event. He'd woken up in the morning with this idea in his head, and supposedly this company sold for 88 million or 100 million on NASDAQ or whatever. And he said, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. And I said, oh, really? Could you see its face? And he said, no, I couldn't see its face. And you can never see its face. So I said, oh, you go to LA because he works with cancer kids. His all medical stuff. All the inventions he gets are all
it's all biomedical stuff. It has to do with the spine too, which is interesting.
So he has these cancer kids in Miami and in LA. So I said, well, you go to LA all the time.
I swear, bro, they're covering so much that my mind is already my brain. Not my mind, my brain is kind of overloaded already. So I'm definitely gonna pause at the half of the video, which is gonna be soon, because this is so much they have to make some notes afterwards, and gonna research a little bit. Or make notes, man, because this is way too much, bro. This is too much. No, but it's good. But it's like they're jumping from one thing to the other, you know? So kind of hard to follow sometimes their points, especially when you don't have the context. And I'm not too deep into all of them. So, yeah, man. Crazy. Crazy what they're all talking about, man.
You should get regressed by Yvonne Smith and find out who the hooded figure being is. And he said, yeah, I may try that out. And I asked Yvonne a number of times. She said, no, he never showed up. So at one point he pulls out his cell phone and he says, so what do you think of this? And I think I sent you these photos. He shows me this photo of these two guys on a painting. And these two guys are flying through space on this painting. And they look like they got pajamas on. One guy's older than the other guy. There's no signature of the artist or anything like that. He says, what do you think of this? And I go, I don't know. No idea. Two guys flying through space. I don't know. And then he shows me another photograph of these balls all going down this tunnel. And I go, he says, what do you think of this? So I don't know. The balls going down a tunnel. I don't know, Tim. I know you should. And then he shows me another one, this eclipse thing, where the eclipse is taking place. And I know what you're talking about. And then he shows me this photograph, it's like a screen on the outside of a building, and it has all this the outer space photographs on the sort of like the planets and galaxies and stuff like that. And I go, I still know what you're talking about. And then he shows me the catchers. He shows me this car on top of parkades. There's 2 buildings, and this is 999 Sepulveda Avenue. I think this is all still intact. It's right outside of LAX. You can see the runways from LAX from there. 99 Sepulveda Avenue. There's 2 buildings, and there's a parkade in between. So this is on the top floor of the parkade, and it's like a 56, 57 Chevy sitting on top of this parkade, sort of all by itself. And then he shows me, and you can see something in the back seat. He says, see that in the back seat there? And I said, yeah. He said, you know what it says? I says, no, what's it say? It says, I wish I could travel through time and space to be with you. And I go, that's what it says? Says, yeah, that's what it said. And so I go, I still don't know what you're talking about. And then he says, you know what this is? I said, no, I don't know what it is. He says, this is the old Hughes Aircraft Building. I said, Tim, I still don't know what you're talking about.
Howard Hughes.
And then he says, this is where and I don't remember exactly what the wording was. He said, this is where the jump room was, or this is supposedly where the jump room was, or I don't know if he clarified that this is for sure. And I go, really? Can I see the photographs again? And then he shows me the first one with the picture of these 2 guys flying through space. And he says, you know where that one is? And I said, no, where is it? He said, right outside the elevator. I said, that's right outside the elevator? So, of course, I thought this was like a garbage story. Like, I mean, nobody would believe this.
No,
Obama going to Mars and all this stuff. I go,
sure.
Maybe this story's true. So I get Andy Basiago and I phone him up and I said, hey, Andy, I just got somebody showing me some photographs from the Sepulveda Avenue there. Were you in the front building or the back building? And he said, I was a young kid. I don't remember if I was in the front building or back building. And I'm thinking, well, maybe this story's true. And then it was years later, I'm sitting there, I'm going, what the heck was Tim Taylor doing there? If this is a garbage story, why is this high-level guy doing at this building? There must be some truth to the story. And then you hear the stories that Jesse tells about
Townsend Brown stuff,
this obsession with time travel and stuff like that. And he shows me there. I'm going, holy cow!
Part of the time travel club or whatever.
And then he had that thing. And then the other thing that he gave to me during that conversation was what I do is you don't want to watch.
Man, I don't know the Boeing jump room story. That's what I mean. They're covering so much. Also, what I said, Jesse is involved again, not talking to Townsend Brown, about Townsend Brown. I've seen the video a little bit, but didn't follow it too much. Oh boy, I have way too many things to research.
UFOs. I mean, forget it. We've got 250,000 UFOs on a database. We don't need another 10 or 20,000. We don't need that. We need to talk to people who are actually interacting with the intelligence. So that's what Tim Taylor does. That's why he contacted Tim. Why would you not?
He contacted Chris. I know for a fact he's in contact with Whitley Strieber. I know he's in contact with Charles Hall. In fact, he went to Charles Hall's place over 15 years, yearly, and he would bring high-level officials over to his house for dinner.
Yeah.
One of them was named by Mary Therese, Charles Hall's wife, David King. This guy, and I mean, if you ever go look this guy up, make sure you're not logged into LinkedIn because you don't want him knowing that you're looking at his stuff. It is a mountain of clearances. Like this guy's been every department in the DoD. And so, because at first I'm like, oh, this Tim Taylor guy, maybe he's just a fan. Maybe he's like somebody who had his own experience and is just trying to figure out what happened. But then you see these other highly cleared people that he's bringing along with. And that's where I go, wait a second. This isn't just some dinner for schmucks or some personal journey.
Yep.
This is 100% him trying to recon part of the phenomenon that clearly the government is in the dark on.
Yeah, he knows all the connections. He knows who to talk to in various agencies.
Yeah.
So when Tom DeLonge went there and he took the photograph with the NASA carpet.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I wonder if he's talking to Tim Taylor when he was there.
Oh,
and that's the whole thing where he knows all the connections.
Mm-hmm.
And but then when getting back to this conversation I was having with him, then I know that you want to deal with experiencers. That's what you want to do. And he said, oh, I think I'm dealing with a girl. I think she lives near where you used to live. And I said, oh, really? Where was that? He said, Steinbach, Manitoba. I said, that's like 30 miles from where I live. And he said, you want to talk to her? I said, yeah. I'm on Tim Taylor's cell phone. He phones her up. I go, Connie, Tim gave me your name here. She starts telling me about 5 years old. She tells me the story and it's like, can I contact you later? I'd like to follow up on your story or whatever. And she'd now moved to Florida.
Yeah.
And but I'm on Tim Taylor's cell phone. There's 2 women. But the one woman wasn't home or something, but I talked to this one woman. And that was where I got the notion that that's what you got to do. You got to talk to these people. And what she was doing is she was, for Tim, she had a log sheet. And she had all these visions. She said it was like she was on the internet 24/7. And she'd give me these things. Like the one she gave me was 16 guys underground in a coal mine in Utah, and the coal mine collapses, and they send in 3 rescuers to rescue them, and they die. It collapses again up above, and these guys die, and they call off the rescue, and she's down with the 16 guys below as they die. And then she has the one she describes, and I found it, and she was crying. She was like upset, like I found it. It was a true story. And then the other one she had, and I found the actual photograph looked exactly what she was describing. She says there's an upper rail in China. There's the 2 trains, and they're on the same track. They're not supposed to be on the same track. And the one they've hit, and the one train is hanging off the track, and there's a mountain in the background. And I found the photograph.
Wow.
And then she told the beings at one time, she said, I can't take it. Stop. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
Stop doing this to me. And she said it stopped for about a year. And then she said, I guess this is my role. Okay, let it go. But he was watching her, and she was recording all the visions she had, all the experiences her son was having and stuff like that. And he was logging the same as he was doing to
And there's
Chris
something
Alexa.
valuable there for
He was
him.
logging that stuff. And that's what he realized. That's why I say, if you want to understand, you got to talk to people who are talking to the intelligence.
Yep.
Those are the people you got to talk to. Those are the people, you could sort them out and disbelieve them.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever,
sure.
But you still
Just
got to get
listen.
the messages. Because as I mentioned to you before, I actually had got into the channeling thing, and I got this guy, his name is Andrew Davis from 1847, 1848, who was channeling. And there's always a story that, channelers are all different, the same as you see experiences. It's just anecdotal. They're all telling different stories or whatever. And you start logging them together, and you realize that 37% of people who claim non-human intelligence connection have had near-death experiences. 80% have had an out-of-body experience. 90% have had paranormal experiences. 40% of them say at one point during the experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And you start seeing these patterns when you start getting the people who are actually getting the
had
connection.
experiences.
So I started doing that, and I realized that's what Tim was doing, and Chris would be one of his top contacts.
One of many, I'm sure,
of that are giving him. Then he had to pull off the background, but the final contact I had with him,
with Tim Taylor,
he phoned me from Huntsville. And he was in a restaurant, so I really couldn't hear him very well, what he was talking about or whatever. I just remember the one story, and it gives you comfort if you tell your story to your friends, relatives, whatever, and they discount you. Because Tim says, my daughter, she's giving me a hard time about this. She says, Dad, you got to quit doing this. This is embarrassing, Dad. What are you doing? And she's giving him all this stuff, and then Tim says to her, just remember where the Lexus comes from. And that shut her up, because he made a lot of money on it.
He did make a lot of money.
But I watched the protocols, and same as the protocols, you take a look at his protocols.
You ever try that? You ever try his protocols?
I didn't try his protocols.
I should try them.
But the other one's Gary Nolan. If you're Gary Nolan, you talk to Gary Nolan about his protocols, because I knew he was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So I said to Gary, I said, can I quote you? Can you give me a quote on how this works? Because the quote he originally had, he said, I don't know how it works. He said, I don't know if there's little elves in my head or what's going on. He said, but I know how to make it work. And he does the whole thing. You go through all the process, you work through the whole thing, and you try to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then you put the question beside the bed. And he said, the next morning or within the next couple of days, the answer, it's this knowing, the answer is in my head.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, he said, yeah, it's like an FBI thing. I get strings going between all the different things. And that's what you find in inventions. When I did a book on Inspired, talking about inventions, I take the hologram and the laser. Both these guys were working on it. They couldn't figure this thing out or whatever. And then what you do is you shut down the left brain, the rational analytical brain, like I did when I was watching, when I had the download experience. I was watching crop circles, which I wasn't interested in. The left brain shuts down. The signal, suddenly you pick up the signal because there's no noise in the signal. You pick it up. And both the guys that were the hologram by Gabor and Towns, who got the laser, they're both sitting on park benches. And one guy was watching people play tennis, and the other guy was sitting there waiting for the restaurant to open, and they were quiet, and they weren't even thinking about their work, and all of a sudden, boom, it comes in their head, and they get up and run back to the lab and quickly write down.
It's like shower thoughts.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
You're there just kind of letting your mind drift in this liminal state. And like you said, if you shut down the incoming noise, then you're amplifying, your receptor for this type of signal, or at least your connection to this cloud.
So so I wrote a book called Contact Modalities. We looked at 70 different modalities.
And when you talk about a modality for people listening, what do you mean by contact modalities? Like, give me some some of the more fundamental ones.
Ray Hernandez had the original. He's the one that came up with the term. So when I was on that lecture thing going down to Florida, Ray Hernandez his wife was seeing UFOs all the time.
Ray Hernandez.
He's like, hey, you're crazy. She's religious and whatever. He's like, yeah, it's crazy, And then one time she kept repeating this, and these big, huge ships with stained glass windows in them and stuff. And he said, he's standing outside, and he said, I'm waiting for a guy to he's an IRS attorney. So the guy's bringing these tickets, and he's going to write him a thing to get him out of court or whatever. And so this guy's going to be 15 minutes. He's sitting there. He goes, nothing to do. Might as well, see if I can bring in those ships that my wife's seeing. He says, okay, if my wife is seeing ships, let's come down and prove it to me. And he's looking around and goes, 15 minutes. Goes, I knew that was going to happen. Looks, it's like he said, Wembley Stadium over next to his house. He goes, oh my God, this is for real. And he calls his daughter, hey, come down. And she comes out, and they're standing there. And then the guy comes with the car, and the guy doesn't believe it. And he says, what are you crazy? And then he says, and he says to them, he says, you better show them something better. They don't believe this. And all of a sudden the lights start twinkling and going on, and these people get in their car and they take off. So he came up with the.
I'd love to experience this too, because a lot of times I'm sitting on my balcony thinking about, like, please show up for just a brief second, bro. Nothing is happening, man. Just see like satellites and planes, but make it happen, guys. Make it happen.
He looks up UFOs and consciousness. So of course my name pops up. He says, you can communicate with these things. You can actually pull them in. And I said, well, yeah, I know that. And he said, I need to know what's going on. I'm going nuts. I'm only sleeping 2 hours a day. I'm reading books on near-death experiences and quantum physics. And he's just talking a mile a minute. And I said, well, I'm going to be in Florida. I'm giving a lecture on consciousness. And you can come to the lecture and we'll have a talk. So he said, yeah, okay. So he texts his wife because his wife has no interest. He says, we're going to go on a second honeymoon. We're going to go. And they go, and he comes in, he says to his wife, tell Grandma what we saw. Tell Grandma what's going on. She says, you guys, you talk too much about UFOs. And she walks away. And so we tell the story. And then 2 days later, he's in a traffic jam in Miami, completely stalled. Nobody's moving. And he's sitting there listening to a NPR broadcast on a guy doing body fat. He's making art out of body fat. And he's going, that's kind of weird. And all of a sudden, boom, he's out of his body and he's up in whatever, some non-local reality. And his wheel is spinning around, and there's these images. There's remote viewing, psychic phenomena, near-death experiences, mediumship, all this UFOs, all this sort of stuff. And the wheel is sort of spinning. And in the middle it gets the idea, it's like consciousness in the middle. And the beings say to him, Ray, you got to quit parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing. So that's my version of how this works is that you are at a level that we're in the bottom of the water. So you've done out-of-body experience. Somebody may do meditation, have an experience during meditation. So you're in the bottom of the ocean and it's dark. You can't see anything. So you have an out-of-body experience. You sort of float up into the water and you go, holy cow, there's something else here. And you see this fish and you go, what level am I on? And the fish goes, you're not on any level. You're in the water, you idiot. And it's like there's no levels. It's just you go, the closer you get to the light, the more you can see. And certain people can get higher up in the letter than the others.
Interesting.
And so this is what we had, this contact modality. You got to be able to shut down the left brain, the little voice that talks. Yeah. And once you can do that, and some people like trance channelers can do it. It's like music. Some people are good at it, and some people are really good at it.
Yeah, maybe that's why that's how you also enter these flow states, right? Yeah. This creative state of mind where you're able to navigate your thoughts more clearly. But also late at night seems to be another one, or some people even, will take medication or substance to get themselves to shut off part of their brain so they can, so they don't have anxiety, or so they don't think of all the tasks that they have to do at work. And it's in those times when those things are shut down that you're just kind of like in this liminal receiving state where you can have these ideas. And that's, I've got a tattoo here. It says Carpe Noctem. This is, I know myself by now that at night when the rest of the world is kind of sleeping and when I'm just about to go to bed, it's in those moments when you're in and out of consciousness, sort of floating toward, and your mind's just kind of freely wandering, that you'll get these quote unquote downloads. And the best piece of advice that I can tell anybody is just keep a bedside notepad.
Exactly.
And write it down, because I guarantee you will forget it. You will forget it. You'll remember 1% of what you're, what you're
I had
thinking about.
two major ones. I had one.
Okay, guys. This is the perfect moment to stop, because this was a very, very good thing he mentioned. I'm actually also more one of those like late night guys, but sadly it's at the moment not really possible to follow the schedule because of work and stuff, so I have to wake up early. But I definitely know these moments where in night, you're just like daydreaming or night dreaming actually, and thinking about stuff, and you have this crazy creative boost of energy all of a sudden, and sometimes at night you just can work through for hours and hours and you just have to go to sleep. long time ago that I had that because of a schedule and stuff, but I know these moments, man. So this is definitely a moment where you're connected to, yeah, a field of information that you grasp into and take things out, I feel like, 100%. So wow, Grant Cameron, dude. Well, this was one hell of an interview. So we made it to the half, actually a bit more. So we're gonna, yeah, look at the second part, or make a second part, I think, on Thursday, probably on Thursday. Great interview though. I feel like there are like 20 cases, 20 things I can get out of this interview alone, like big stories in general that they talked about already, which I don't have any context, or I don't know the context, so it's kind of hard sometimes to follow, really, like with the jump house and stuff like this. So yeah, man, if you know something about it and there's something where you say or where you think this, I have to know this, please write it into the comments. And overall, guys, super interesting thing. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you did, please hit that subscribe button, man. Leave a like, leave a comment, say hello. Also, if you hated the video, give it a thumbs down. Whatever, man. We are all here to discover and have a good time in the end. And that's what I try to do with this. So I hope to see you in the next live stream on Thursday. And otherwise, there will be also other videos coming, definitely. So I'm happy that you've been around, and yeah, man, have a good time with your loved ones. And I'm gonna see you in the next video. Till then, guys, I'm out of here. Ciao, ciao.